Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of the Scratch Track Podcast, presented by the June Grim Show and co-produced by Mr. IVEST. I am the dude.
And I'm Grim. And today, we're going to talk about one of those topics that's kind of a fun topic. Now, it could cause some good conversation and debate, which I hope it will, so we'd love to hear a lot of what you'd have to say below. But we are talking about super groups, dude, not average run-of-the-mill groups. Super groups.
No.
So
Super.
I think the definition of a super group is more or less the coming together of members of a group that have already been successful in other musical endeavors. Is that a pretty reasonable?
I think it is. It's interesting because I'm actually, now that I'm thinking about that definition and looking at the first one we're going to talk about, they actually weren't, they were on their way, but they weren't quite established yet as like a super group, but they sort of became it afterwards.
Well, I guess that's fair because, why don't you go ahead and tell us who these mates are?
Yes. So our number 5, we're going to give the top 5 here. Our number 5 here is actually Temple of the Dog.
Now, I think this is interesting because I would almost say in the way that we have defined it and what you just said, these guys are in a way to me tied with Cream. And I will say why, right?
Okay.
Because you had mentioned that, okay, let's talk about Temple the Dog. Primarily, actually not primarily, solely made up of members of Pearl Jam and Soundgarden, right?
Yes.
So
yep.
I think most of Pearl Jam at the time, with the exception of the drummer. And ironically enough, the drummer at the time was Matt Cameron, who was Soundgarden's drummer. And eventually when Soundgarden kind of would go on to become Pearl Jam's drummer later on. So that's interesting. And then I guess other than that, you had Cornell.
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting because this album, they came out with their lone album, and that was before Bad Motofinger and before 10. It was I think 4 months before 10 would come out, and then about 6-7 months before Bad Motofinger would come out.
I did not realize it was even before those.
Yeah, and so the interesting thing is, and we'll probably talk about this on our subsequent episode, is that the album came out, and I think it's A&M. I think they were the record company. I think they sold 70,000 copies. But then once 10 and Bad Motofinger came out, and that stuff blew up, and these people actually knew who Pearl Jam and Soundgarden were, at least outside of Pacific Northwest. They hugely known. About a year later, they actually re-put out a single from this, I believe, Hunger Strike, and they had recorded a music video also previously, and they put that out as well. And then boom, that did amazing, because I know for myself, I didn't really know Temple of the Dog certainly before I knew of Pearl Jam and Soundgarden. I found out about them
like a lot of people. That's what introduced you, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
and especially for us being in Michigan and not,
maybe
if you're in the Pacific Northwest,
and kids,
and also 91. I was what? Oh my God, I was 9 years old.
I was 10.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I wasn't getting out to Seattle and going to a lot of shows then. It was fucked up.
I wasn't. But dude, it's kind of funny, man, because you think about supergroups, right? So Chris Cornell is in this one. So he's basically played with all the members of Pearl Jam. Then he was in Soundgarden, and then he does Audioslave, which is the other members of Rage Against the Machine. So man, he did pretty well for himself.
Now, here's
the
parallel why I think Cream is tied for this spot, because it totally, in retrospect, Cream is widely considered a supergroup. However, unless you were really hip to the scene, I think in London, you may not have really known about Jack Bruce or Ginger Baker. I don't know. I could be wrong on that, but basically, as I've listened to some things on them, it sounds as though like much like Temple of the Dog, these guys were, and Clapton had done something. He was a little more on the upper tier at that point, but still, those guys had done really awesome things, but may not be the most widely known. But then, of course, Cream just blows up. So, anyways.
Exactly. Well, I think we should move on to number 4 on our list, Grim, and I believe you have that one to announce for us.
This is, well, I was going to say an American, and then I was going to say an American and Canadian, but then I realized that I think Graham Nash is actually British. I think.
Yeah, I think
Crosby,
so.
Stills, Nash and Young, mate.
Definitely.
I mean, so yeah, you got members of the Byrds, you got members of Buffalo Springfield,
the Hollies.
The Hollies, yeah.
Yep.
And they broke up and never wanted to be in a band again, so decided they had to start a band.
No, exactly. Well, it's kind of funny, man, because they, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, they basically, if you look at their career, they had played together, put albums together, basically for decades. Neil Young joined them. This was, I think, kind of his first, kind of, I'll call tour with them, and they put out Deja Vu. But then they, in the 80s, I believe 88, they came out with an album called American Dream. And then 99, the 4 of them put out an album called Looking Forward. I think this is probably, in my mind, their, Deja Vu is sort of their most popular.
Oh, album. And that period. I mean,
that's in that period. Yeah. That's when they were. Yeah. But it's even interesting, we have an episode coming out, or maybe at this point it's already been out, about Deja Vu.
It's like we've been here before.
Dude, yeah. They didn't really work together much on this album. They all had sort of their own songs and stuff. They sent tapes back and forth between LA and San Francisco. They were all in the recording studio at different times. There was only, I believe, 2 songs where they were actually all
in the studio
together recording as a group. So in a weird way, they didn't have to be in a band together. Now, obviously touring and doing that sort of stuff, playing shows. But man, I mean, dude, this album, Deja Vu, and some of the tracks that they've put out together have just been really exceptional. And one of my favorite, what I would call, supergroups.
And almost the earliest, not to say, I mean, hell, you could argue the $1 Million Quartet was the first supergroup. Do you know about the $1 Million Quartet?
I don't think I do.
At one time in a studio, what was it? Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis. I gotta look it up, but dude, it's messed up. I mean, it's like Johnny Cash.
Oh wow, okay.
$1 Million Quartet, and I think I don't know if I've heard the recordings of it. But it's Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, and Johnny Cash. So I just missed Carl. But
it's a decent lineup.
Yeah,
decent lineup.
But anyways,
a few gold records. There.
But this is a supergroup that did more than just a one-time thing. Now, the best supergroup may fall into that category. We'll have to see what happens. So who's next on the tee for you, dude?
Yes, I am going to go. It's a more recent supergroup. I have chosen them Crooked Vultures. Consisting of
I might have
Joshua
health problems
Homme,
after hearing that
Queens
one.
of the Stone Age, Dave Grohl. I mean, his resume speaks for itself.
Yep.
And John Paul Jones, Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, pretty amazing group there. Now, I found this sort of interesting, dude. Apparently in 2019, Jimmy Page said on his Facebook page that he could have actually been a part of the group as well, based on conversations that he had with Dave Grohl.
Dude, that would have been sick because they have so many overdubbed guitar parts anyways.
Yeah, I mean, and Jimmy Page is he's pretty good, right? So,
well, I think this is an interesting one because by the time they had formed, I mean, we don't really need to talk about Led Zeppelin's, roster, catalog at that point. But dude, Grohl's already been in Nirvana, and the Foo Fighters had been successful for years, and Queens of the Stone Age had also been successful for years.
Very successful. Yes.
So to me, this is a really interesting one because it's almost like they were probably the most established in terms of just being in the industry and known for the longest time.
Yeah.
except for maybe number 2, which we'll get to.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, all of them had at that point had not just achieved stardom, but like, dude, super stardom, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, just pretty much, I mean, Dave Grohl, obviously Nirvana, at one point was the biggest band in the world. Led Zeppelin at one point was the biggest band in the world. I mean, Queens of the Stone Age, not exactly, full of slouches, right? Like,
yeah, not to say they were,
I mean,
like Led Zeppelin level, but I mean, dude, pretty awesome. And yeah.
Yeah. So and they even said after, they came out with their album and they did like a little tour, John Paul Jones in 2010 said, they were ready to record new material. And he was like, oh, we'll be getting into the studio soon. But it's tough when, you have kind of these bands. And this was more of a side project.
Yeah. Just happened to be a really amazing supergroup side project.
Absolutely. Now they did reunite for 2 tribute shows last year for Taylor Hawkins. They did one at Wembley Stadium, and then also in LA they did one.
That's
cool. They just played it wasn't a full concert. It was just a handful
of tracks. Man, that would have been cool to see.
But very cool to see. It would be awesome, man. It'd be great to see. I mean, now that, I thought maybe since, Taylor Hawkins passing, that Dave Grohl might take a break from Foo Fighters. It doesn't look like that has happened or is going to happen. I believe they're either on tour or going on tour very soon again. Okay. And Josh Homme just finished an album with Queens of the Stone Age. They're currently on tour. So, scheduling wise, it might be a few years. And, not to be morbid, I don't know how old John Paul Jones is. I imagine he's not getting any younger. I mean, shit, dude, Josh Homme, Dave Grohl aren't getting any younger. No. They've dabbled in substances. So, let's keep our fingers crossed that, they can put out a new album and maybe we could get a tour of them soon. Because, man, I would love to see that. That would be like a once in a lifetime show. So, well, I think we should move on to number 2 on our list. What do you say there, Grim?
Yeah, it's tough, man, because in a way, number 2 and number 1 are very hard to delineate for me, but we're gonna keep the ranking as it is for us.
Yes.
And number 2,
for our purposes.
I mean, let's face it, if you're gonna have one of the top 2 supergroups, probably should have a Beatle in it, right? Well, you're welcome. Yeah, guess what? Because the Traveling Wilburys are coming in at number 2. Now, the Traveling Wilburys, and this is why it's hard for me because with the lineup, it's really hard to say who could be number 1. You could argue they should be because they at least made an album. But
that's true.
Anyway,
that's true.
George Harrison, Roy Orbison. Like a rock and roll legend and somebody that these guys all looked up to, by the way. So that must have been cool. Tom Petty. I don't know. They just found, Bob Dylan. He's in there. And then Jeff Lynne, who was a producer and founding member of Electric Light Orchestra.
ELO. Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty solid lineup. A lot of hits there, right?
Now they did do another round of recordings because their main album is called Volume 1 and it was released in 1988. And to me, it's one of those albums that it was just part of my childhood. It's a great record and it's just, that's one of those things you remember. But they did record something called Volume 3, and that was in 1990, and it was basically them minus Roy Orbison, who had died before Volume 1 got released, because they did a music video for End of the Line, which was one of the singles, and they showed Roy Orbison, but they made him look like a ghost. It was kind of cool for the time.
Interesting. Yeah. That is interesting, man. Wow. Yeah. I mean, just a fantastic lineup. Some of my favorite musicians over the years. And it's cool when you see a lot of these guys and creatives kind of get together and work on music together, because, you know, it's been well documented. I mean, George Harrison and Bob Dylan have been, you know, very good friends. I mean, from way back in the 60s and everything. And to see them, you know, collaborate and work on something is, you know, pretty awesome.
So those ones don't surprise me as much, but how amazing would it have been to be Tom Petty in that situation?
Oh yeah, dude. Right.
Holy shit. Oh dude. Man. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I don't know. I think I read somewhere, and I'd have to look back. What was this? This was like 88, yeah, I guess.
Was when the album came
out, I think, there was something I read where they were saying, you know, this also kind of helped sort of rejuvenate Tom Petty maybe a little bit.
Oh, he was in like a slump or something at that point?
Yeah, I think so. Now I'd have to look at his catalog and what he'd come out with. But certainly he, you know, after this, man, I mean, I remember Mary Jane's Last Dance, obviously a big song. His album Wildflowers, I believe that won album of the year.
If it was after this that he did Don't Come Around Here No More.
No more. Could have been. So, well, Grim, should we move on to the number one supergroup on our list?
Yeah, and there are many things to say about the number one group.
There are.
Probably the most, if there's an unfortunate piece to it, it's that it really only existed for one night.
Yeah.
And that night, can you look up the date?
I can.
That night was in December of 1968, I believe. And it was at a little event called the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus, which was a televised kind of circus variety show and featured bands that, I don't know, you might have heard of. Jethro Tull, The Who, The Rolling Stones, Taj Mahal, and Marianne Faithfull.
But
who really stole the show was a little band that went by the handle The Dirty Mac. And you can see those mates right there. And from my left, Eric Clapton, John Lennon, Mitch Mitchell, and Keith Richards. I mean, holy Christmas.
It should say the date on the cover, too.
Oh, does it?
It says December 11th, 1968, but it actually, the show itself went on so long. I think the Rolling Stones didn't even go on until after midnight. So essentially they say December 11th through the 12th.
Yeah, it doesn't say that on the not on the album, cover of the album.
But dude, what the heck? What a fantastic group.
Yeah.
Now, it was short-lived. I think it's cool that, you know, this is a super group, that they gave themselves a name. I think John Lennon's the one who came up with it. Obviously, I mean, just some amazing musicians. They only performed what I would call like
two songs,
I guess.
Yeah, one song and a jam, really.
One song and a jam. But dude, they performed Your Blues by the Beatles off of the White Album, Disc 2. And it's awesome, man, because there's a couple things that's great about it. One, the Beatles weren't playing live at that point. Two, they hadn't played, you know, since they weren't playing live, they hadn't played anything off the White Album, which, you know, has a few good songs on it. So, you know, I think that to me was like really cool that they chose that song to play. Now, the second song, Whole Lotta Yoko, has more of a free form sort of
it's a jam
vocals
with somebody yelling in the background, basically.
Yeah. And dude, I wish that. Oh, here's the thing, man. I want to talk about using AI software.
Could AI cut her out of it,
dude? AI that out, man. And dude, I would totally dig that track. I really would.
I still dig it. I just like to think of somebody like some weird Indian instrument or something.
Yeah, because it's a little piercing to the ears from what I remember. But I mean, you know, it's tough because they didn't put out an album. They never went on tour, you know, so it's a little different than some of the other bands that we talked about on this list. But you and I have just said for years and years and years, man, that's the greatest.
It is.
And, you know, it just is. So, you know, I think that kind of wraps up our list here. I definitely love to know some other super groups out there, maybe that one we have missed. Some honorable mentions. We've talked about, you have Audioslave, Cream, sort of a little bit. Some more modern ones like Velvet Revolver when Scott Weiland joined kind of the other members of Guns N' Roses. Dude, even Atoms for Peace when you had Tom York and Flea getting together.
Atoms for Peace is a good one. Velvet Revolver is kind of sketch to me, but yeah.
Yeah. Dude, one potential one they've, and this is sort of Dirty Mac-ish. There's a YouTube video online, but it's Josh Homme, Trent Reznor, and I believe Dave Grohl.
Oh, that was from the Sun City documentary.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's cool.
I was like, man, I'd pay to see that. I'd buy that album.
Yeah. Well, you can get the Sound City record and it's on there.
Or I could get that. So anyways, yeah, it would be great. Like, what are some other sort of super groups out there, collaborations that you guys really enjoy?
Mention.
Blind Faith is an honorable mention. That's right. Definitely love to know what some people think. So I think that about wraps it up. Wouldn't you say, Grim?
Yep.
All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Time to go. The Dude Grim Show.
Scratch a Track is produced by The Dude and Grim. Additional music provided by Moore and the Tins. Copyright 2023, The Dude and Grim Show.